Uh, Good evening all and welcome to this evening's lecture. My name is Simon Alford and I'm President of the RIBA, seated in my office at my home in London. Very nice to see you and to have a global audience. In a few moments we'll call to the virtual stage tonight's award winner and speaker. But before we do, I would like to add my own very warm welcome on behalf of the RIBA to the recipient of the 2021 RIBA Charles Jencks Award, Anupama Kundoo. The award is given to an individual or practice who has made a major contribution simultaneously to the theory and practice of architecture. The RIBA Charles Jencks Award has premiated the work and talent of architects such as Alejandro Aravena, Benedetta Tagliabue, Rem Koolhaas, Charles Correa, Zaha Hadid, and Ensemble Studio, to name a few. This year's winner, Anupama Kundoo, is without doubt a very deserving addition to this illustrious list. We will hear more about her remarkable career shortly when she presents to us. The RIBA is tremendously grateful to designer, author and broadcaster Charles Jencks, who started this award with prize money that was awarded to him from the NARA Gold Medal, which he received in 1992, nearly 30 years ago. He graciously donated this prize money to the RIBA to set up an endowment fund, the interest from which was initially used for exchange program between British and Japanese architects. The remit of the fund was changed in 2003, and instead of cultural exchange, the award celebrates architects who excel, appropriately in the case of Charles Jencks' interests, in both architectural theory and practice. The prize poses a theory of architectural theory that is not only theory, into quote, as written text, but instead it offers the idea of theory as a creative force which drives architectural practice from outside of direct architectural production. For example, philosophy is considered to drive Peter Eisenman's practice. Painting was a parallel practice for Zaha Hadid. And Rem Koolhaas, who started as a journalist and continues to use that perspective on his own career to this day. This attitude towards theory and practice comes partly from Jencks' study of Le Corbusier, who sculpted, painted, and polemicized, and with whom Jencks understood as an exemplar of the psychologist Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences. And of course, that is exactly what Charles Jencks himself did. Fundamentally, of course, the award is a celebration, therefore, of Jencks himself, who worked as a critic, historian, architect, and landscape architect, amongst other things, exercising many different intelligences to engage with the themes of his interest. Following his death in 2019, the Jencks Foundation, under the directorship of Lily Jencks and the RIBA, chose to continue this award in Charles's honour, ensuring that this unique prize continues to celebrate the way architecture is motivated, nourished, and accelerated by other disciplines, and recognising the plurality of perspectives that Jencks himself celebrated in his life work. So now I'd like to welcome to the screen, I was going to say stage, to the screen, this year's winner. But before I do, I'll invite Lily Jencks, Director of the Jencks Foundation, to talk about the award and the choice and the foundation. Thank you very much, and over to Lily.
Hi, thank you so much, Simon. It is an honour to be able to continue this prize in my father's name and to celebrate tonight some of the many themes that drove his work, which I find in Anupama's work too. Interestingly, Anupama was nominated to win the award by 3 of our judges. However, of course, there was a lot of deliberation as the jury discussed the role of theory in architecture today. Why do we have theory? What's it for? Who does it serve? And how can it do more? As Adrian Lahoud, one of the jury members, pointed out, not only architecture culture, but even more so architectural theory in the traditional sense of theory, with its focus on written tracts and polemic manifestos, with its prizes and publications, is still very focused on the West and English-speaking world. This is a serious detriment to architecture culture, which has so much to learn from other cultures, not only cultures of building, but other ways of living, ways of cultivating community, and in Anupama's own words, other ways of spending our most valuable resource, our time. The way that we have been building doesn't work anymore, and we need new models. Anupama's work, as we shall see, is filled with new models of how to build and where our care and attention and our time should be spent. Anupama Kundoo trained as an architect in Mumbai before developing many early projects in the experimental town of Auroville in Pondicherry from 1990 to 2005. This is where she developed her first research project into building technologies with material research and sustainable construction materials. This early work has flourished into a building career of more than 25 years with site-specific work in other contents and contexts. Anupama has always had one foot in building and one foot in academia. She's taught design units in universities around the world, including at Parsons, the New School for Design, the AA, the University of Queensland, at Yale, and currently at FH Potsdam. And the publications and prizes are catching up with Anupama too, as she has exhibited and published her work in numerous places, including the Louisiana Museum in Denmark, with a Lars Muller monograph, and by winning the recent Auguste Perret Prize for Architectural Technology. Anupama's work has been described as contemporary vernacular or critical regionalist, but as she said to my colleague at the Cosmic House, Eddie Heathcote, essentially, I'm a modernist. Now, this should set off alarm bells for a prize in the name of Charles Jencks, who a curator at the V&A once called the Pope of Postmodernism. However, we know there is a lot of modernism, even in postmodernism. And here I find a helpful way to understand Anupama's work as a postmodernist, as a hybrid project. It is both modern and after-modern. Similarly, I see a lot of hybrid paradoxes in Anupama's projects, which are really fruitful. While she seeks to address the big modern and universal issues of mass urbanization and affordable housing and sustainability, her work is never a one-liner solution. It is always both and. Take, for example, her opportunistic use of materials, what Charles might have called an ad hocist approach, where bike wheels are used as concrete formwork, or local pots are placed into walls to create windows. This work, in which she is inventing fabrication techniques on the ground with builders in real time, it's almost like action painting. In it, there is an acceptance of the opportunities that a difficult detail or a site condition might throw up, and a willingness to go along with them. Paradoxically, Anupama combines this loose-fit fabrication opportunism with beautiful drawings, exquisite planning, and a passion for communicating her ideas in exhibitions and publications. Both and. Another example of this hybrid paradox would be her practice of turning accepted notions on their head. So where some people find austerity, she finds abundance. For example, she talks of building in India, not as a lack of expertise or resources, but as an abundance of time, an abundance of people and community. And finally, the collaborative nature of her work, which is obviously a collaboration with fabricators on site and with her students, while always managing to be designed very much by the hand of Anupama. Building Knowledge was the name of Anupama's lecture at Columbia University following her Venice installation. That lecture title chimes well with the previous name for this award, which was Visions Built. It's that combination of being visionary, driven by her idiosyncratic theories, and being a builder that has won Anupama the award today. For those of you who've been to the Charles Jencks Award before know, at the end of the lecture, my father would always join the winner on stage to elicit a further conversation about practice and theory. Sadly, as my father died in 2019, I know he would have wanted us to continue the conversation format. In its infancy, my father supported a group called the New Architecture Writers, which is a brilliant organization to bring more diverse voices into the architectural conversation as critics, writers, and critical thinkers. Like the Jencks Award, with its focus on theory and practice, New Architecture Writers recognizes that architecture culture needs an agitator to be critical and questioning so that the profession can live up to the better angels of our nature. That clearly is how New Architecture Writers is answering my first question of the role of theory in practice today. Tonight, I'd like to welcome Thomas Aquilina, a founding member and now the co-director of the New Architecture Writers, to join Anupama in the conversation on the virtual stage after her lecture. Thomas and I are both joining you from the Cosmic House, a house that my father and mother designed as a manifesto of postmodernism in the 1970s, and which we've recently opened as a house museum, and would love to welcome you to visit. Behind Thomas is the spring room, and behind me, which has ad hocist elements such as spring lights and collaborative elements such as the fireplace by Michael Graves, staircase by Terry Farrell and others. It too is a house full of paradoxes and games. It was amusing for me to try and find links between Anupama's work and this postmodern manifesto, which are aesthetically and stylistically so different from each other. But I think there are many ideologies that connect the work and a desire to push architectural thought forward so that it can engage with the most pressing issues of today. Thank you, Thomas, for leading the conversation, and I welcome Anupama to deliver the 2021 Charles Jencks Award lecture. Thank you.
Thank you. So first of all, thank you so much for having me here. Thank you for this amazing honor. I'm so overwhelmed that all I can say is thank you. I can't also help imagining how wonderful it would have been if I could have visited the Cosmic House and had this conversation personally with Charles Jencks. We miss him. I'd try to summarize the practice of 30 years with this title, Freedom from the Known. And the general finding by the end of these 30 years that I feel that it is human resourcefulness that if we didn't apply to its full potential, it is then that we will run out of natural resources. I think we've been very anxious about spending natural resources, but we aren't spending as enthusiastically the human resources that we have. I'll elaborate as I go along. My work as an architect began directly after graduation from college in Bombay. Already as a student, I had wondered about the prevailing construction habits of our times. What was the point of doing so efficiently things that perhaps shouldn't have been done at all? This is the question I often ask myself, because in post-industrial times, there seems to be a notion that we need to hurry up. We're calling it rapid urbanization. We have the sense of urgency and the need to be efficient above everything else. And we perhaps have lost our way in the habit of daily life. So in the 3 decades that followed, this questioning of basic assumptions and goals drove an architectural philosophy that was research-oriented and a teaching method that was practice-oriented. What emerged were theoretical principles, a practice, research findings, and a way of teaching that were interwoven to feed each other. I'm grateful to the Jencks Foundation, RIBA, and the Charles Jencks Award jury for recognizing that this resulting body of work is no less a theory than a theory that is expressed in words. My own understanding of the essence of architecture was centered around the definition of the void, the negative space that humans can inhabit. As the ancient saying goes, the function of the pot lies in its nothingness. Its materiality simply serves to enable the spatial definition. But given that current ways of building create huge environmental, social, and economic imbalances, my inquiry led me to rethink architectural materiality, where the choice of materials and building technologies, including building processes, were inseparable aspects of spatial design. Great architecture is the sublime synthesis of the material and the non-material, where materiality fully expresses the underlying spirit and the spirit transcends the matter that expresses it. When I began my practice, I already felt that what remains to be known is so much more than what the known has to offer. in order for human society to prosper, and the past references will fall short. The future is coming at us at such an exponential speed that past knowledge is not going to suffice in steering our way forward. Instead, what would help are our human capacities. Human capacities to imagine, to experiment, and be willing to try new things and to adapt. These are the factors also that drive evolution. I think the future is pushed forward by imagination and held back by what we know. In order to freely imagine a better future, not only do we need to critically examine current habits and whether they serve us, we need to address the constraints created by our own limiting beliefs. I began with experimentation, and my studio, along with my sites, became my laboratory. The most important thing about an experiment is not the outcome, but the fact that it was conducted in the first place. My projects were the result of questioning of specific assumptions and experiments conducted in new ways of doing things. My context was enveloped in shortage of resources and the shortage of money surplus with which to create architecture for humble everyday activities. And I decided to look with new eyes for what we had in abundance and celebrate this rather than focus on the shortage that prevented us from having a better life. Look, in this image, you see me straight out of school trying to set up an architecture practice. In the foreground, you see what we have in abundance. And in the background, you see humans trying to engage with whatever was available. This is a potter's community that I encountered, and I noticed, I was moved by my awareness that rapid urbanization was threatening the livelihoods of many communities. And I wondered how could urbanization guarantee their livelihood by redesigning what they could be making rather than them struggling to sell the conventional cooking pots. I was looking at how could we build things with what we had, available material, available skills. So I started questioning, and the most important thing, I suppose that the driving process was questioning assumptions, and all the projects that resulted were the result of all the various questions that were posed. And I'll just walk you through a couple of examples. The first thing I built drove me to question permanence. I was trying to build a hut for myself. I had stepped out of Bombay, dropped out of the rat race, as it were, and I'd moved to Auroville, and I was trying to solve my own shelter. And while building the simple hut, I started questioning how permanent should architecture be, and what is permanent and what is temporary, and in what context do we examine that? How do human lifespans interact with material lifespans? And this is the hut that resulted. It was built out of round wood and tied with rope. This is a very basic technology. Many people live like this. Of course, my architectural background led to a different design of the negative space with the similar materials and similar technologies. But what was interesting to find out in this experiment was that when we use round wood as opposed to timber, round wood may take 3 years for that cross section to grow, whereas timber would have to be a rectangular cut out of the tree, so it would have to be probably 25 years. And for some reason, permanent architecture needs to use it as a rectangular section, whereas the so-called temporary architecture used round wood because of its irregularities and because it's cheap. But on the other hand, it made me think that it's the same properties of wood. On the contrary, the round wood is stronger because the fibers are still connected when you see the section of the wood of the tree. So these are the kind of questions that I addressed, and I saw value in things that perhaps other people didn't see value. And I saw a way forward in experimenting with that. So this was my the house, and the solar panel or the motorbike probably cost as much as the house itself. But otherwise, it was a very simple space. But the fact that I lived in this for 10 long years and spent a lot of time doing nothing, I mean, claiming the time to think about what is better to leave undone and what to do with the years ahead of me and what kind of a practice to have. Another thing I discovered is that materiality does not begin with the architectural project, but it begins with the sourcing of material already. I started noticing because I developed new ways of seeing and taking the time to see more and to think more and perceive more. I noticed how material manufacture and whether the materials were extracted directly and used directly by hand, extracted by hand or by machine, or whether materials that were extracted needed to undergo a manufacturing process of the industrial kind or the handmade kind, and the extent to which those processes are deeply embedded in the territory and how it affects territory when material is extracted from it and becomes an architectural element. And even for the energy that goes into transforming a material to another one, whether the energy that goes into it is coal in a big, large factory or bio waste or from trees that are planted specifically for that purpose, that these kind of things make all the difference. I realized that a brick is not just a brick. A brick made in one way or another way makes a whole difference to the context. And also the energy, like in the green rating systems, the impact of a brick and how it is evaluated is not a standard thing. It's not just the quantity of energy that went in. It's many more things that are sometimes very hard to measure. And they shouldn't just get left out because they were hard to measure, the qualitative aspects. So realizing how extraction of material affects the territory and the architecture that is made with materials that are extracted very far away and driven to the place, how territory affects architecture and how architecture affects the territory back. These were very deep learnings, and I started discovering in a place where I thought there was nothing, that there was a lot. There were communities who were dealing with lime production, or there were people who extracted stone from the place, and architecture could be built with that. Local meant really local. And the process of extraction, it already defined architecture, especially when it was handmade, because the textures, that the imprint that the hand left on the material is very different from the one that a machine leaves on the material. And what we make makes us. So in the extraction, the mind of the human also develops accordingly. So some of my early projects were a lot about very judiciously choosing materials and paying attention to the processes that were involved. Another thing I learned is that known materials and technologies have uses that have yet to be discovered, that we have yet to discover. And it is important in our times to experiment boldly. So with the potters community that I showed you images of, I was trying to create a catenary vault so that there would be no need for a substructure, and that regular terracotta tiles required a lot of wood to hold them. At the same time, they did not insulate. So I was trying to achieve a holistic solution and make things with whatever we had on the spot. And this is an example of how known materials can be put together in very new ways. And in times of shortage, if we could use human ingenuity to build many more square meters with the same materials, I mean, we would discover how to eliminate the need for a lot of materials and to use the same materials intelligently, serving all the needs like climatic comfort, countering gravity and so on in more intelligent ways, and reduce materials but increase the human labor and interaction and engagement with the material. That was one of the early strategies I discovered. And I realized that through these processes, you not only build buildings, you also build the human. So some of these productions, as you can see, were really done on the spot, because the people who produced materials earlier, even the brick makers, also were farmers, and people did multiple activities when it was industrialization that reduced humans to 8-hour jobs and so on. So once you start making a change, it starts changing everything else. And that results in an architecture that, even though it's contemporary, this is the wall house, my own house at the moment, the one I use now when I'm in Auroville. This is the result of an architecture where, even though the spaces are contemporary, the materials and the making anchors it to the place, and the place is understood through the material, and the people who made it and all the hands that engaged with it leave their imprint. So this is an example, for instance, of terracotta pots being used to create a filler slab with like a lost shuttering system, so that 2 bars out of 3 can be saved. So there's a lot of efficiency, 33% of steel used instead of 100% in conventional slabs, and a lot of volume of concrete reduced as well. So these were early tests for large span structures that were applied in other structures elsewhere. So this house was like the laboratory, since I didn't have to experiment at the cost of the client. The other thing I learned is that it's good to design so that anyone can build, anyone can participate. This whole chase for expertise is very alienating, and it comes at a very high cost if people of the place cannot be involved in the production. So I think design can do the adapting. And for instance, there are people who could only afford housing if they had things that anybody could do, such as to rammed earth walls, for instance. It allows people who need to, count on sweat equity in order to take a bank loan, so they can do something in order to receive the support to have a house. So these are some of the strategies that I started applying. This is an prototype of an urban eco community that was built, a co-housing settlement built in 2003. And there were many areas of experimentation also on the green infrastructure front. So the rammed earth walls were built in rammed earth because the earth that was dug out of the rainwater harvesting tank and the wastewater treatment plant as well were optimum for building with earth. So we didn't build everything with earth, but we built as much as we needed to spend. I mean, the amount of earth that was available got spent in the molecules, got relocated in the architecture itself. These are streets on upper level. They facilitate community. I also realized that one of the learnings is that the quest is to waste no embodied energy, even though, at least in the West, there's a big effort in trying to cut back on running costs of energy. Embodied energy is another area that is very important, because we cannot retrofit this if we already spend so much embodied energy in creating architecture, especially when it doesn't last that long. So this is, of course, a radical experiment of that. This technique was, this is a technique called baked in situ earth construction. I coined that term to describe Ray Meeker, a Californian ceramist who pioneered this technology in South India. And I did my PhD on his work. So what this involves is building an earth house and cooking it, baking it in situ to convert it to ceramic. The idea is that typically when bricks are made in kilns, about 40% of the heat gets lost into the walls of the kiln. And the idea is to build the house as a kiln, stuff the space with bricks and other ceramic products, and bake the whole thing, so that while the products are cooked, the house is fired as a consequence. So what this means is that we don't even need cement. The roof and everything has to be made out of the same material that you have lying around, which is earth, provided that the earth has the properties that are suitable. But basically, the house becomes a producer of building material rather than a consumer. So this is the kind of potential in such a technology. Of course, it's in its infancy, but all kinds of ceramic products that we use in architecture, from toilet pans to wash basins, glazed tiles, whatever, can be produced inside this. This, of course, was a social project called Voluntariat, Homes for Homeless Children. And even the finishing, etc., were achieved through using waste material like tiles and so on. So the other thing is to build so that everyone can grow. I've been looking into empowering people of the place to build with whatever simple materials, such as chicken mesh and plaster. Put together, it's called ferrocement. And instead of RCC, you need to use only 1 inch of this material. And because it has common properties of compression and tension, and it's a very promising material. It's Nervi who had already begun this experimentation, and I was inspired by Roger Anger's work in Auroville, and continued the effort and research with ferrocement. And I'm looking at, for the future, alternative natural fibers, but also looking at glass fiber and so on. So this is a sophisticated technology, but it is very versatile and easy to do. This is an example of modular elements, which are containers with which you can stack and interlock and put together a house in a week. The cement pigments are, the cement already contains pigments and the final finish, so that they are more appealing and the surfaces are more pleasant to touch and they can be waxed. And the idea was to produce this not in factories again, but in the backyards of masons' houses, and so that they can teach local people to just produce various elements and create local economy. This, some of you will remember that in the 2016 Venice Biennale by Aravena, this was shown there in full scale, 1:1, and you can see how the wash basin, etc., can be embedded inside there. So there is a toilet in the foreground as well, and ferrocement has a huge potential, and we've been collaborating with engineers in Mike Schleicher's department in Berlin, and testing the possibility. Look how this material, for instance, does not break, but has properties that could be very interesting for navigating climate change because of the ductility of this material compared to reinforced concrete, apart from the fact that we use very little material in this case. I've also looked, since the material is so light, I'm also looking at how formwork, which is a big deterrent in efficient use of cement, how that could be made with recycled carton and with forms from origami that can be folded, unfolded, and mesh and formwork carried to a place, and in a matter of 4 days, a shelter can be produced. Trash is unimagined treasure. There are very unconventional materials that we have picked up from the garbage, or we've been producing materials. If one were to look at urban waste as a source of material, architectural materials, and there's a lot we could directly use, not only recycle, but use directly. This is a project that was built with books, vacuum packed, to make canopies, because actually many people don't know the extent to which books are a huge problem, and they get either burnt or pulped, etc. And I was invited to make a pavilion in Barcelona called Library of Lost Books, and that's what we called it. It was for the idea of liberty. And we produced this structure because I think temporary structures could just be built out of things from the trash, and you just extend their life, finish using the building space, and either make things so permanent like the substructure that you can directly make something else out of it, or use something from the trash, borrow, create the shade you want, and not buy anything as far as possible. So we've done lots of things with, I'm continuing with the book theme because we did lots of furniture. We've done it, once you start working with urban waste, you realize that almost anything can be used for something. Rather than looking at waste as a problem, for example, these are bicycle wheels that were used as formwork. Of course, that means that the design of the windows is modified accordingly, or broken chai cups in masonry, etc. The other thing I learned is that we are, in our times, there's a lot of over-design happening. And maybe that's because of lack of precise knowledge. But actually, good enough is perfect. We often use too many materials because we don't know, and we don't take the time to know what is exactly required. This is an example of a project that is called Situ, Sri Aurobindo World Center of Human Unity. It's actually a community space. And this is an example of a concrete building where ferrocement was used as a lost formwork to be able to build this structure with only what you needed from the engineering point of view. And instead of using 125 cubic meters, we were able to do with 75 cubic meters. And for that, however, we had to do 3 or 4 detailed designs to be able to calculate exactly what was needed. And so that's what I mean, that if time is well spent, and if we spend human resources of intelligence, time, community engagement, etc., we could land up saving a lot of natural resources. I also think that in architectural education, it is good to create opportunities for the thinking hand and for an embodied learning. These are students of the AA who had come to India when I taught a diploma studio with Andrew Freer. And we had done a workshop on roundwood construction because of the Hook Park, which had Fry Auto's roundwood buildings. And we tried to understand in a 10-day workshop what it involves, so that those things that people don't know don't get over mystified. But in all of these projects, there's a lot of opportunity for, if students are allowed to confront real scale, real materials, real place, and interact with real people already while they are in the classroom, then knowledge, academia, and practice are not don't get separated in the first place. And I think academia is a place for deeper engagement with ground realities, and students already can be resourceful and have the confidence to go out there and build things. And sometimes a day-long or 2-day-long workshop can allow this sort of opportunity. This is a project with waste denim. It's not really a waste, it's just the rests from everybody's jeans that get exported out of India. And the waste denim piles are an environmental problem. So we're trying to build tensile structures. Some of you will remember here, for example, my participation in David Chipperfield's 2012 Venice Biennale. And even this one-to-one building of the wall house inside Venice, under the topic of common ground, actually had involved some new investigations, including some of these concepts, but also involving students in the complete design to build exercise. And everything was translated in such a way that the whole thing could be again built with little expertise. Anybody could build that. So that's why the students were able to build such a full-scale thing. So in conclusion, I realized that if we develop what is plentiful, it'll extend that is finite. Some images of other architectural projects that I've done: a daycare center that is recently complete called Sharana, a library that includes Braille, the town hall complex for Auroville, and now I would like to mention one other human capacity, optimism, and that I discovered what humans can achieve through goodwill and collective imagination with optimism. And as an example of this a good project to illustrate this with is the whole project of Auroville. So I'm currently writing a book on since Auroville crossed 50 years and was planned by Roger Anger as a pedestrian-centric city that addressed all these holistic problems that society is facing. I'm still involved in this project, and I collaborated with him for 17 years. For those who don't know, Auroville was founded with the participation of 128 countries who brought soils from their origins and brought it together, with an aim of creating a city that would try to achieve human unity through collaboration. It was started on a barren land, brownfield, that got converted through the making of a city to this kind of a forest. So we have to question our assumption that if we build cities, we will destroy the landscape and the environment. It can really easily be the other way around if we believe it can. I just want to explain that and emphasize that I think if we think big, then our lifespans are very small, are going to fall short for big ideas, for big grand imaginations. I already started collaborating with Roger Anger early on in the urban design, and I've done many areas of the city planning. I discovered also that many things that I'm thinking today are probably going to be only seen many years after I'm gone. And I think that projects do not need to start with ourselves. I felt like after Roger Anger passed away, but also already earlier, that I wanted to extend his life, or, we need to extend the lives of our forefathers, because if some of the things that they've started need that much time to continue and not always just start with ourselves, and in order to catch up on time, I've been continuing with the urban design of some of these elements. It's a large housing for 8,000 people, co-housing in small clusters. It's a quest for a new typology for the tower, to replace the tower building, because we have the tug of war that on one hand we want density, but on the other hand, the tower doesn't work for the human scale. So we need to address that urgently so that we reduce our footprint with the growing population. So I have been not only building upon the work of the previous generation, I have already taken on, since right early on, working on such projects in an interdisciplinary way. This is your Jan Gale advising us during a project, the student work in Stuttgart when I was teaching there. But as I showed in Louisiana Museum recently, that the urban design was done by me, but the projects in there are my student projects from Yale University, from KADK in Copenhagen, and Fachhochschule Potsdam. So they already can begin to have a head start so that this project will materialize. On the back, I'm supporting their research with full-scale testing of new materials for rethinking what future facades could be, with power-generating paints, latest generation of solar print panels that are now replaced by patterns you can print on textile, and waste denim, etc. There's also urban farming integrated in this facade, and so on. So what is interesting here, while we are trying new models of future living, what we absolutely insist on is retaining the human scale, because our biology has not changed, our scale has not changed, and very, very many human needs are going to take many more years to change compared to our lifestyle. So in conclusion, I would like to say that our built environment is the physical stage on which all human stories are lived out. This physical stage is the historical and ongoing manifestation of human imagination, operating within real or imaginary constraints. I have tried to advance the idea that architectural imagination must transcend design and enter the realms of material science and economics, where some of the bigger questions reside. The thrust of my inquiries has been to find practical ways to fulfill the universal human aspirations for refuge, purpose, and social engagement. My work is not a theory by virtue of explaining or predicting some phenomenon. Rather, it is a theory by way of being a collection of internally consistent, empirically derived theoretical principles that challenge and extend existing knowledge. I had been challenging underlying assumptions long before I learned that that's what it was called. What I found out later is that I was, in effect, challenging existing knowledge by challenging existing assumptions. You might say I became a theorist because I couldn't get used to the idea that just because something is widely believed to be true, it must follow that it is exempt from the obligation to be proven true. Thank you.
Wow, that was extraordinary. Really a beautiful survey of your work, Anupama. Thank you. I am Thomas Aquilina. I'm an architect and academic, and it really is a privilege to be here tonight, albeit in different places, in London and in Berlin. In my role as this evening's agitator, I'm aware of this quite impossible task of filling the late Charles Jencks' enormous promo shoes. Charles was never afraid to ask the difficult questions, and he embraced a plurality of voices and meanings. He used architecture as an instrument to ask deeper, more philosophical questions about how we live. And hopefully this conversation will take us on a journey that he would be proud of. If anyone from the audience has any questions, please add them to the chat, and I will try to integrate those into this conversation. The RIBA Charles Jencks Award is, I think, really quite different to any other architectural accolade. It isn't just about recognizing a portfolio of work, but it's about celebrating that relationship between an architect's practice and theory. So congratulations again, Anupama. I think you combine practice and theory in incredible ways. And this is fundamentally important because it's about investigating our ideas critically. It generates a friction between speculation about architecture and speculating within architecture. And as Lily mentioned earlier in her introductory remarks, I am live at the Cosmic House in West London. In fact, I'm in the spring room, surrounded by spiraling lights, a disco-mirrored ceiling, 2 Jencks London columns, a Graves fireplace, and 3 female busts. Now, let's travel back to your world, Anupama, back to Oroville and Kotagiri. In your architecture, I think we see so much sensitivity and sophistication and what I'd like to call an embodied intelligence. I want us to get away from the labels of vernacular, modernist, regionalist, which I know you want us to. For me, your work is and has a universal quality. It is very clearly contemporary. It is incredibly optimistic. It balances material and non-material. It is resourceful. It is deeply anchored in its place. This is an architecture in flow. So with all of this, it's been quite difficult for me to narrow down on a set of themes. But in the end, I think there are 3 themes for tonight that I think we can tease out. These 3 themes, let them be a sort of scaffold to our conversation. That is architecture as protest, the theme of time, and the role of the everyday. So let's begin with this first idea. Architecture as a form of protest. And given the current global atmosphere of crisis and emergency, Anupama, how do you manage to cultivate optimism in your approach and in your work?
I think, first of all, the architecture of protest, the word protest, I know what you mean when you use this word, but just from my way of being and my general demeanor, I am not being a rebel, you know. I have done things that made everybody call me a rebel, and they thought that my action protested against various things that seem to be wrong. But the way I would describe that is that I actually do feel one with the larger collective. I don't like to create a polarity as the only way to protest. I would rather say that rather than react, I found it much more powerful to create. There's so much that we know that we don't like. We know that things ought not to be how they are, and we are deeply disturbed by so many things. And whenever I felt that way, I asked myself, what would I create? How ought it to be? What if we just build that? And then I would ask myself, and I don't mean architecturally only, I'm just saying in general, I would ask myself, what would I do if those obstacles were not there? Because when we see the obstacles, we are frustrated and we want to voice that frustration. But if you just for a moment think, what would you do if you didn't have the obstacles? You have clarity about what would you do instead. And then I thought, once you know it, why don't you do it directly? And so I would like to use the protest song. I would say, like, if you take the spirit of John Lennon's Imagine, this, I first of all like the word imagine, because that's what I feel is the most powerful thing for humans and for architects. But that is the way to rebel. I mean, imagine. And if you put it, you see the mood of that song, who will not agree with it? Whereas if you protest, you react, and then it just goes on, the ping pong, And whereas if you can define the imagination such that everybody feels included, why would it not happen?
That sort of connects to your idea of freedom. It is this title that you framed, freedom from the known. And I suppose this idea that imagination is a place of liberation. That's sort of what you're sort of hinting at. If we head back to 1989 and that incredible photograph of you in the Porters community, and you spent a decade forming space to think and to test and to experiment in the town of Pondicherry. That feels like quite a non-standard route, and I suppose I don't want to use the word what were you protesting, but what then were you imagining in that decade, and how did Oroville come to inform your practice?
I think it's always a mutual thing, I think I chose to go to Oroville because of what I had inside. It's the inner resonance that attracts an outer decision or a circumstance. And similarly, the outer also shapes the inner. And these are all choices, actually, to remain somewhere or to go somewhere. I was attracted to the audacity to imagine something like Oroville, because despite a lot of things that one can look at the shortcomings, whenever the dream is big, you have a lot of shortcomings. But if you just look at the audacity to dream big and just to think that this is the society some people have imagined that we humans deserve or that we are ready for, the ambition, the vision was so attractive because first and foremost, it questioned land ownership, for instance, and it questioned while proposing, while that's the way of the architect, you envision, but it's already the steps to manifest the vision are already in the vision somehow. So Oroville was that kind of a thing, and it was a mix between choosing Oroville and leaving consciously things that I didn't want to. I didn't know about Oroville much, but it was an active decision to not only leave Bombay, but to, as a young graduate, to decide not to succumb in the so-called successful, get absorbed into the so-called successful offices, because I just didn't feel that what we had, the ideals we had for the profession, etc. I didn't think that that those projects were worthy of us, And I thought that it's better to not do anything than to do that thing. And I used to, because I had to also pay my bills, and I had, to, as an Indian woman, taking, living differently or not conforming to society, you have to pay quite a big price for all those kind of things, but those were decisions, and that's what I mean. Without rebelling, there are ways to, without protesting, of non-conforming, that are very powerful, is because if I just save my energy to apply them, not to the things I don't believe in, but save the energy, but find out the clarity of what it should be applied for. And so being in a place like Auroville, meeting an architect like Roger Angers, and a lot of people who actually, just took the leap and began doing things, And for me, it was just a fertile ground to develop myself and also give back to my society at the same time.
Can you remember what that first meeting was? That first time you arrived in Auroville? What did it look like at that point?
It looked like nothing. I mean, but it was very beautiful because there was this bright red earth. I had it was just looked like just like a barren land, and there were trees that people had planted, and you could see that there was a man-made sort of a imprint which you had to look for, but there wasn't much to really see. There was I found a kind of refuge in that, because I was going through all that turmoil, when I left Bombay. It was not an easy time for me. It was very, what I perceived was very much to do with my inner state, knowing that every action you take is going to create the tracks for your next action, and leaving and not knowing where you're going, it puts you out of your comfort zone. But I realized that I personally had a life where I never really had a comfort zone, so that I decided that I preferred adventure to security.
Have you ever found a comfort zone ever since?
I try to, yes. I think the comfort zone is not like, even when I design homes and all that, I don't like comfort. I don't define comfort as a place that you will dodge problems, or you would, to flee from some of the things you have to be doing if you want to progress. I think I look at comfort. I want my future self to be comfortable. I want to have a setting that doesn't stand in my way of becoming myself. I want to have that, enough of that openness. And I think I am today more comfortable. My comfort is with who I am. And if I feel insecure, to befriend it, or things like that. So my sense of comfort has to do with accepting that progress is very often uncomfortable. And what is the kind of environment you need to nevertheless progress?
So, because your work and your academia has taken you to New York, Brisbane, Berlin, London, Madrid, Barcelona, Venice. I wondered if any of these places made you feel more or less comfortable, created different kinds of discomfort, but also how did these places then make you think differently about your territory and about India? And I suppose also practically, how have you managed to kind of work between these places simultaneously?
So having grown up in Bombay, where, you make peace with your own insignificance, because you know how many people there are. And you, when you're at home with your own irrelevance, somehow you feel, so, well, I had that kind of experience behind me. And I spent years in solitude also, in my the prime of my youth, I would say, almost, where many people ask me, what the hell are you doing, in the middle of nowhere, and giving it all up, as they would say. And I was very driven by, actually at that time, I was very driven by my own questions, not so much about architecture, but just about the meaning of life and all that. What is everything for? And so it took many years doing all that. So those two, having done those two things, I started feeling that we are more common than we are different. And my sense of home became more about how I felt and in my roots. And I realized that when I went to all of those places, it's like the roots were so deep that the branches had spread. It wasn't as if I'm just relocating and relocating. It didn't feel like that. It felt like those relocations were just new branches. In the banyan tree, you have roots coming down when the spread is very high, but I mean, very, very vast. And I think it was something of that sort. And all the places I lived in allowed me to just see the differences, and therefore the commonalities, and to realize that we are Homo sapiens. We are more common than different, and everything is about awareness of contextualizing how we as individuals sit in the collective. And yet I do have my favorite places. Okay, I felt most at home, of course, Bombay, New York, Berlin. These are my favorite.
And not London.
London, I love London because I love English. I just love to be able to communicate and read books without effort. Like in Berlin, I have to, German. I lived in Madrid, there's Spanish. So, I just feel a sense of home from the language. And but otherwise, I haven't spent that much time in London. But yeah, I still prefer the New York and Berlin thing. I think London.
What is it about those places? What is it about New York and Berlin that makes you think differently?
I think that in both these places, there is a sense of, there isn't a kind of anxiety. I mean, there's like New York and Bombay have a similar thing. Where, I mean, there is a sense of community, even though it's crowded and it's big. So there is, in Berlin, there's a sense of neighborhood. You could live in one kiez, like one kind of quarter, and you could walk everywhere within that, And so there is always an awareness in these cities that we are so many, that that the diversity is so huge that you feel well, And that's what I liked. And I also feel that I just met lots of nice people in these places. I mean, I could connect with people effortlessly and felt at home, basically. Yeah.
Maybe we should think about time a bit, because I think in your Louisiana exhibition, you'd described taken time in really extraordinary ways. And today you spoke about building in the void, which to me sounded, really sort of speaks to a temporal process as well. Could you maybe help us sort of illustrate your thinking, your sort of conceptual framing of time, and your relationship with it as well?
I think that one of the first awarenesses, or initially when I realized that we were creating cities that were not livable according to how I perceived living in them, and that we were creating ugliness, and only we were doing it rapidly. I mean, we were this whole thing about rushing about and the sense of urgency, where we were cutting back on human, cleverness or whatever. We keep on doing things because of the standardization, and we keep defending. I mean, whatever you want to do, they say the system doesn't let me do it. So we've created a culture and a lifestyle where our automated processes have enslaved us. So I used to wonder why I question the notion of time is money, and that humans can't afford to take that much time because things will be expensive. But I used to ask myself, what is the cost of saving so much time? What have we done with all the time we have saved? Are we more happy? Are our cities better? What is the big advantage? And have we progressed? And is the new landscape looking like something that we find appealing? So these were my questions. So I realized that there is no absolute scarcity of time. And I think what we have a scarcity of is of initiative and of imagination, and taking the time to challenge the system and to, create, a system that is designed to consume and produce at speed. That was a starting point. But then I also realized that we have our own time is the one thing we control, whether we are rich or poor, no matter where in the world we come from, because the time is not something managed by us. It's the sun path. And then it depends how we've lived, if we live longer or so many factors. But that's the one thing, how we spend our time is the one thing we can control. And are we spending it in the best possible way? People are so trying to save time, but not reducing their stress. And I wanted to first spend my own personal time to have a fruitful life, first and foremost. And then I realized that time is in fact an undervalued resource, which we should be eagerly employing rather than trying to save. And so these were the sort of thoughts that I had. And I thought that if we applied our time correctly, and if individuals in decentralized systems were allowed to apply their time, like in large supply chains, like anything from coffee to architecture is being produced through large enterprises that are often not even in the country. So a lot of that money and time is going, it's not that we're saving time, we're saving the time for actual production, and we're spending a lot of time and money on managing. I mean, the Starbucks coffee is not much cheaper, rather it's more expensive than the you just don't get a personalized service anymore. But what's the difference? They'll employ the same humans and pay them not to think, so that only few people will think. So I realize that time is a fantastic thing to be spent very happily. And we say we had spent our time well. It's a good thing to spend.
So, I mean, it sounds like you're suggesting time as resource, time.
Yes,
time.
Yes.
And how does that connect then to this idea of the void, to building in the void? And I think in a way,
well, that was not so much of a time.
Do you see a connection?
Idea.
Can you see a connection between the two?
The void. No, I think what I meant was that architecture. Today we look at architecture as how we appreciate architecture from how it looks in renderings and how picturesque an object looks from the airplane, perhaps, rather than from how it may be perceived if humans were to occupy its voids or the streets that are. Actually, that's how architecture is felt. Architecture is inhabited by a human body and in a certain scale, and you either feel intimacy or you feel that is monumental. And so, but as we are focusing so much on that, what we can see rather than what we can feel, we are focusing our efficiencies on that which we can measure rather than, what we can't measure, but we know empirically that something doesn't feel good. But we need those things. We focus on those things that machines can manage for us, and a lot of important values that we all know, like the emperor's new clothes, we know them, but nobody's saying it.
Why do you think no one's saying it? What is that? Is that because there's too much focus on efficiency, as you'd kind of framed it at the beginning of your lecture?
I think the main reason is, I think most people I meet, you can see people aren't happy with things, but they often think they're the only one. Or they think, now, how am I going to change the system alone? And this kind of questions where we underestimate the power of one person,
Yeah, yeah.
But look at Bauhaus, you know, there were just like a handful of people 100 years later. They have affected the entire way of talking about architecture. So it's enough to be 1 or 2 people or 5 or whatever. It doesn't matter. I think the problem is, that's why I talk so much about limiting beliefs. We believe that those things cannot be any other way. And I would say that I realized that a lot in this make-believe world, in which we take a lot of things for real, but often we ignore, like we take human, like man-made laws more seriously, our codes and whatnot, our conveniences that resulted in codes from a previous generation or whatever. We take sometimes those type of confinements more seriously than the natural laws. I'm the kind of person who would rather surrender to natural laws such as gravity. I would never question it, but I see a lot of architectural projects where they do question gravity. They do question other natural laws like climate. The sun is going to move that way, you know already. So we assume that those natural laws could be questioned, but we are so afraid of the man-made law. We think, oh, we'll never get this through and this cannot be done. And the code specifies this and that. I like to question whatever is man-made, because that is so temporary. And that is the job for, I mean, because all those people, we are not victims of these building trends. Somebody developed that. Somebody developed these facade systems. Somebody made those manufacturers, some manufacturers produce those catalogs and they believed in it. They've got those codes approved, etc. But the thing is that often people underestimate, or they continue doing things even though they know that it's not correct.
Well, yeah. Well,
or it's not.
Thinking about time and thinking about this idea of something outside of sort of mechanics, being here in this house, the cosmic time, which is sort of from the big bang to the diurnal drum beat of our own lives. I think spending some time in this house in the last few weeks has helped me think differently. But I suppose what you're sort of hinting at in my mind is also a form of collective practice. This idea that it could be 2 people, it could be 5 people, you know, but actually collectively, when you're thinking together, you can sort of make sort of the optimistic impressions and changes that you're hinting at. You'd spoke about building knowledge at the Venice Biennale a few years ago, but looking at your work again, it makes me think that there's not just building knowledge, but there's building buildings, there's building confidence, and there's also building communities. And I wonder if you could sort of describe how you've approached that task of building communities through your work.
I think buildings, I think architecture is collaboration. It is anyway. Architecture is collaboration. No architecture can be created without collaborating. Maybe the architect may think, or some people may perceive it as a solo thing. It isn't. We all know that. It doesn't mean there's no authorship, or that it doesn't mean that the architect may not have certain responsibilities of knowing the whole big picture, etc. But the fact is that it is a co-creation anyway, I think. So the example that comes to my mind is, I think when you look at these murmurations of birds, you know, when they just, when you get overwhelmed and see all that, and you know that each individual bird is not necessarily aware of the formation. We who are seeing the whole thing are. But the bird may think they're alone. But you can see when, for each individual bird, simultaneously the collective influences the bird's flight. The solo performance is constantly simultaneously influenced by the collective, and the collective is simultaneously influenced by each individual. One guy could move that way, it affects everything, whether you know or you don't know. That's about the awareness. I always feel we are no different. We look at COVID times, you know, we are connected. I mean, if we think we aren't, I think it's a very new notion, and it's only in our head. I think we are anyway. I always felt that, and I always worked that way, not because I'm patronizing and want to help some community or whatever. I just feel everyone exists and coexists, and everything is produced as co-production.
Your images, to me, did two things. They showed the work kind of in its as a product, but also there was an emphasis on the process, which I think is very important to sort of illustrate. That process included lots of different people, lots of craftspeople. How have you managed to successfully negotiate craftspeople in your practice? And also, I think something that I feel it speaks to your ethics is that it's not just an engagement in its place, but the craftspeople also come with you to build installations when they are in Venice or when they are in other places. There seems to be this richness in exchange.
Thomas, I genuinely don't believe that we should be patronizing anyone. I deeply don't see it like that. I don't see, everybody takes on different roles, and even in every project, you may have more of a role. Or it's like an actor, in a movie, you may have a big part or the small part or whatever it is. In that film, you may be doing a little role. You're not acting less because you got a small part, I mean, you're acting 100%, what gets edited, what you do. I think I'm just aware of, whenever I interact with humans, that there is a whole human in there, and that the human intelligence is in everything. And I think that's because I look at life force is the main creator of everything. That's the main driver. Life architecture is, life-centric. It's a life that in us and in others that actually create things. And therefore, it's the decisions you make and the lifetime you spend. Being aliveness is what creates new things. And the stagnation is more about not, necessarily maybe being fully alive and realizing the actual human potential. So I think that life, the reason I mention the process being important, because it's the process that actually creates the product. I never saw that the product, of course, we have aims, we have goals, and we have what we can see today. But tell me, who has drawn a thing which did not get challenged by all kinds of forces in the process of making, There is no such thing. I think instead of looking at imperfections that way, I think these things that we didn't imagine are just the process of going from an imagination to manifesting the imagination. All the various things will start getting involved. And it's just a question of synthesis, digesting, and then seeing what was taken in by the project. And I think architecture is just the being that is created by all the various people that it took things from. And I think it always leaves the imprint of the makers. Yeah. Because all these molecules existed in another land form, as a tree or as a living or non-living material, things existed. It was taken by some human and made into something else. And not just one human. All of us did things to make this. And not only in our time, we are building upon things created by others, and others are going to be colonizing the things we've left behind. And that's why I think we have to contextualize the time and space that we collectively, over time and across space, that what we collectively create. I think it's just an illusion to think that we are alone doing something.
As part of that, and I know we've spoken about this idea of ad hocism, something that certainly Charles Jencks had referred to, but in relation to your buildings, we see this where there's a role for the everyday, and how there's an improvisation within the process. Is that something that you encourage and celebrate?
Absolutely. In fact, I had a room called Celebrating Imperfections. Or wait, what was it? Yeah, something like that in Louisiana.
Wow,
You know?
yes.
Because I think what is imperfection? It is only the thing you didn't anticipate. And why didn't you anticipate? It's because you thought about it yesterday. And today you either you know better or you did something because you tried something new. Why call it a failure? Because even if you tested the thing and you found out it doesn't work, you still found out something. And the thing that failed that may not serve the purpose for which you imagined it, but it's innovation is like that. The thing that came out will be used for something else that you didn't expect. You stumble upon things. And we know that we do this every day. We decide to go for a picnic. We look for a particular spot. On the way, you see things. Life happens. You'll meet someone. That's life. It's a pity if we forget that the whole thing the purpose of everything was to have a better life. But if life is like that, life is constantly the meeting of what the impulse was from oneself and what it was met with. So it's not, I'm also not a control freak.
But also there is this layeredness of rigorous testing and iterations of using materials. This is something that there's a real embodied intelligence involved in also what you're practicing.
This is the thing about the empirical. The thing about experimentation, when you experiment, it actually shows you the limits of it, reveals more aspects of natural laws that you did not understand properly earlier. It's something or the other is revealed to you that you didn't understand. So maybe it's an imperfection from the point of view of what you look. Take a stone, if it has rolled a certain way and become round as a boulder because of whatever forces affected it, that shape happened because of exactly those things. So if the imperfection is if you assume that there is a correct thing and measured against that, everything else is an imperfection. I think it's more that we need to be supple to accept things as they are.
And be willing to unlearn, it sounds like. Okay.
And to see it's actually exciting. It's, like children don't seem to, they seem to be easy. I think as you grow older, sometimes it's our own resistance to change that is annoying or irritating or makes us want that sort of a thing. Because maybe I think it's easier if you develop a sense of ease and realize that this is life itself at work.
The Cosmic House is a built manifesto of ideas for Charles Jencks, and I wonder if there's a project that you have or a fragment of a project that you think gets close to this idea of a built manifesto.
I think the wall house could be considered that. The wall house, because there's so many assumptions in there. For example, why should a minimum space room be 10 feet? 7 feet was what was my main dimension over there, but it doesn't look claustrophobic because of all the other things that are done. But there were so many levels, not only the material experimentation, but the plan itself or the generator of so many other ideas. If I were to pick one, I would pick the wall house because it was really like a lab, and you can see many other projects were based on learnings that happened there. So yeah, I would pick that. In fact, MoMA has taken some drawings and the model from me a couple of years ago. I would hope to answer that, my best work is yet to come and all that kind of thing. That sounds good in an award speech. But the truth is that, I think that is perhaps the most, it shows all the various layers of inquiry in my work.
Is it right you've made over 140 buildings? Is that right?
Yes, or more. Yeah, not all of them are good. Or they won't look photogenic, a lot of them. But yes, I did a lot of, maybe more, yeah.
Okay, it's an extraordinary portfolio of work, and very, as I said earlier, this is an architecture that is in flow. As you said, it's very much an ongoing inquiry. What would you say if there's younger people in this audience? What would you say are lessons learned through practice and through your theory as well?
I think two things. One is that fear is not a good advisor. And the other thing is that if you don't like what you're doing, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it because one day something will be different. And no, just nothing happens if you don't do things for some days. Just find what you like to do. Don't do that, because you start with one thing you don't like doing, everything gets created around that, and that becomes your way of life. And I think that's what I would say.
I think that's a very beautiful answer. I know we have only a few minutes left before,
yes.
But and if there are more questions from the audience, please do add them to the chat. I suppose what I was thinking about at this point is do you have an imagination for where your practice goes now? I mean, and how do you see that forming in say the next 5 years or so?
Well, I hope to be able to do more with co-housing. I have some housing ideas for housing, and approaches for high density living that still has human scale, has anything above 7 or 8 stories makes us feel disoriented, and there's so many problems with just mindlessly, monotonously repeating one thing that works. And we know that those stacking of houses don't make housing. But I do think that there is a very big challenge, and there's a tug of war between population and density and human scale requirements. I would urge all architects to really, really, think about that. And I think that I am looking for, there are no easy answers to what I'm right now trying, but I'm trying to see how could we keep our footprint compact and achieve very high density. But I think the time has run out to do low density, high density, low rise. We do need high rise for the current population, but the way we are doing it, I think, is not good. And I don't have all the answers, but I've been working on this since the last 10 years. And I hope some of it will be realized in the next 5 years. But if it's not realized, I still have at least some drawings that are realized. And I hope that some of that will be at least detailed by then, in 5 years.
Amazing. I think that's a perfect way to end this talk, award ceremony, conversation. And Anupama, thank you so much. It's been a real privilege, and to everyone sort of in the audience to think through time as resource and to keep your footprint small and compact. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. More on Instagram or wherever else we meet. Thank you.